Renee, we had the third, and I want to say likely, but who knows? Wait for the numbers to come in. Likely, well, it seems from the comments after the fight, maybe likely. Likely final fight of the biggest heavyweight boxing trilogy of recent times on Saturday, Wilder versus Fury. Tyson Fury knocked out Deontay Wilder in the 11th round with a mule-kicking right hook. We can analyze the fight all day, but let's talk about this. Boxing has been playing catch-up to MMA, particularly the UFC now, for the last 2 decades. Much of that coming from the lack of a kind of, all-encompassing star a la Mike Tyson. Wilder vs. Fury certainly has brought back big interest into boxing, but do we think that it would have been better for boxing if Deontay Wilder won, bringing another American heavyweight to the pinnacle of popularity, instead of the very charming Gypsy King, Tyson Fury?
Listen, I was there for Deontay. I'm gonna just say that. Like, that's why I was there. It was a great fight though. You have to boxing has been very controversial lately for so many reasons. Jake Paul being one of the 99 of the 100 reasons. But it's controversial because a lot of people are like, do we want the celebrity boxing that's not real boxing, or do we want the real heavyweight? Give the people what you want. Okay. Give the people what you want. Is that Gallagher too?
Yeah, that is Gallagher. I'm showing right now a picture of myself and Jason Gallagher at the Emmys, winning an Emmy, standing with Deontay Wilder, who is making me look like a hobbit. And he was he was a really super nice guy and really cool to meet. He was just back there.
You barely made the cut of the photo. I guess I did see that they listed him at 6'6", I believe. So
yes,
understandable that I wouldn't have made the photo either at his height. But to that point, Deontay Wilder is like a personality that you want to find more of. And in boxing, MMA, UFC, that's what sells their fights. It's what's your personality? How loud can you yell at each other? Do we like what you're saying? Is the trash talking there? And then can one of y'all knock each other out? So as I was watching that fight, I think they gave us the heavy hitter, heavyweight, what the people want. But as far as boxing is concerned, am I going to watch Tyson Fury next fight if he fights against Joe Smo that I don't know? I don't know. So I would have to say I'm in the casual fan of boxing. So I'm just going to call it, because, there's casual basketball fans that don't know a lot, but they're talking a lot. So I'm a part of the casual boxing fan group where I was there for the personality and not necessarily the sport. And it was Deontay Wilder going against Fury, the trilogy. I was here for it.
Dana White, I think very smartly modeled a lot of the way that the UFC presents itself around WWE and wrestling, and Vince McMahon was a huge inspiration and influence there. But I agree with you to an extent. But like Tyson Fury, I think he has a kind of gift of gab, as some of like the post-fight videos showed, in which he was, saying this and that about Deontay, about not being a class act and congratulate him, et cetera, whatever. I think, to me, as much a part of the problem of why boxing can't break through is there hasn't been that person, that boxer who has that turn out the lights, oh my God, did you see that kind of power? The thing about Mike Tyson when he ruled the sport was you didn't, as a casual fan myself, you didn't have to know anything about boxing to be whoa, what was that? Tyson Fury, this fight went to the 11th round. There was an early knockdown. But there wasn't that feeling of, in a moment, everything can just shift and change, and oh my God, this person could just get knocked down in a second. There hasn't been that person since Mike Tyson, and I think with just the way the media landscape is, with the way the way that people find sports, the kind of importance of highlights, whether they're shared on ESPN or social media, I think you kind of need that one punch holy shit person, and Wilder's rise was fueled in large part because he had that like mega stopping power where if he connects on that punch, like it's over. And the reason we got 3 versions of these fights, despite the fact that every single fight, it seemed like Fury was never in trouble. He did get knocked down, but it was never really gonna lose. And Wilder was having trouble like breaking through this like jungle thicket of like arms, is the fact that, you know, Wilder on his ascent was this guy who had that like one punch stopping power. And that's kind of the thing that boxing has been like searching for post Tyson. So I think that until somebody with that kind of ability to capture the imagination of people like us casuals who just are checking in to see something crazy.
Yeah.
Until that happens, there's not going to be that one person who takes boxing to the summit. And I don't think I also don't think it's going to be Tyson Fury. Listen, he's 33 years old. You know, I think that there is something to be said about an American star at the center of it to capture the kind of like American market. And, you know, the Klitschko's had all the time to do it. Lennox Lewis had all the time to do it. And I just think for it to break through here, it has to be an American boxer. And I don't think Tyson Fury is that person. All respect to him. He fought an amazing bout. The other thing is it's like weird. You tell me, Renee. Is it weird when you see like a boxer with a huge gut? You know what I mean? Like they're kind of like the jelly
water
roll.
weight. We already talked about this before with Patrick Mahomes and his water belly. It's a thing. I don't necessarily look, and I'm not claiming Tyson Fury's was a water belly, but I like to give athletes that grace in case we have to stay hydrated, a gallon a day. It's difficult because when you look at an athlete, you look at them to be different than you. I think that's what people like. Like, wow, that athlete can jump so high. Wow, that athlete can run so fast. Wow, that athlete is in shape. He looks like an action figure. I mean, look at Deontay Wilder. It was like, goodness, that man looks like
a superhero.
Yeah, like literally an action figure that you could buy in the store. I do think there's something there to it in a sense of when I was watching the fight, I kept looking and I kept thinking that Wilder should be able to win this fight. And he was just fighting an uphill battle. And when you look at Tyson Fury physically and you look at him, it looks like that's what should happen. So I do think there's a barrier there, Jason, that if you see somebody that's not in necessarily physically, it doesn't look like they're in the best shape in the world. I think that that's hard for people to gravitate to being like this monster. I mean, look at Nikola Jokic. He's our MVP in the NBA. And if you ask a lot of people, you know, like, what is it about him that makes you not believe it's the same?
I mean, listen, he's a deserving MVP, but I think you're exactly right. We want these athletes, we want to be like, oh yeah, there's 100. That's the reason why I could never even dream about being in the league, because this person's like a totally different species than me. And then, you know, and there is a weirdness to it when you see somebody like Jokic or Tyson Fury and you're like, okay, but I kind of have flab like that. Like, why is this again? Although I will say, I think part of what makes Fury so effective is that he leans that mass on Wilder the whole fight and just grinds him down.
Deontay could barely stand up.
He was so tired from carrying this big body around the ring the whole time. It's just that those arms are up on his shoulders and that belly is on him and he's leaning on him on the ropes, and it's just a lot.
And it's all legal. It's just I know that Deontay Wilder was probably like, I'm tired, boss. At the end of that fight, other than being knocked out, imagine carrying around that much weight for, I don't care, 11 rounds. That, like, literally there were times where he literally had to take a knee. Like, he went down on a knee because he's like, I can't carry this weight no more. Like, that is crazy. But I will say though, there were a lot of people entertained, and I always like to say this because when people talk about, when people talk about boxing is dead and this and that, I mean, the numbers showed, like, the numbers in the Twitterverse, if that matters, because I always like to go on Twitter to kind of see the temperature, who's watching what and who's not. And so I was on a plane. I was on a flight back from the Memphis game. I called the Hawks at Memphis. It was a preseason game. Literally no one played. The Memphis Grizzlies had 8 players out, including their starting 5, their starting 6, their starting 7. So none of their like heavy hitters had played, and they had earned that right because they were 2-0 and they were killing it. So on the way back, I was on the plane. I got to see the first 7-8 rounds maybe. So I missed the knockout. But boy, oh boy, were people talking about it, which is a big deal because we know that you get paid per view. So good for them. Like, knocked out or not, Fury taking over the boxing game or not. I love that the numbers are there so that people can start getting a little coin in their pockets.
Anybody that was potentially going to fight Pacquiao, I was interested in. And, in Filipino and Mexican culture, boxing is absolutely huge. That said, I think part of the thing with, this conversation about like who can break through and who can lift boxing to that kind of the storied heights that it once occupied when the likes of Tyson or Ali and various other people were fighting. I think, again, the difference is, one, you're talking about a lot of of athletes who are not American. And two, you don't see a lot of knockout power from the middleweights. It's great if you want to learn about boxing and learn about different styles of boxing and gain an appreciation for for the kind of like Mexican fight culture and what it means. But it's not like highlight stuff. It's not the kind of stuff that you're going to see on like a social media feed that is like, oh my God, look at this. At least for the general audience. All of which is to say, I think, and this sounds like a completely like American-centric thing that a lot of people will hate, and I agree that it's hateable, but I do think it would be, quote, better for the sport had Wilder won. I agree. It's more marketable.
I know people don't want to hear that.
They don't want to hear that.
People probably don't want to hear that because obviously the best man won. We could tell throughout the fights that the best fighter
he was better
won
the whole time.
Fight. Now, would I have been excited to see maybe the next fight then to decide who was the ultimate champion? Yes. Or would I be excited to see another Deontay fight after this? Of course, because that's the personality I'm following the same way all the fans follow LeBron James from the Cleveland Cavaliers to the Miami Heat, back to the Cavaliers, and now they are Lakers fans. It's a reality now of how people watch sports. I think boxing is an individualized sport anyway, so you watch for the particular person a lot of times, more times than not. So yeah, I do think that had Deontay won, it would have been way more exciting for me and a lot of other fans.
I think you nailed it too with people following personalities. It's like part of the effect of the rise of UFC and MMA is the fact that like there's not all these people would be a lot of these athletes would be going into the boxing.
Yeah.
They would be in the boxing ring had it not been for the rise of UFC, MMA, and the various tournaments and leagues that are out there. And it's just a drain on talent. So in terms of like, will boxing break through? This is a big money-making thing for them, but it just feels like they go fight to fight, and it depends on who is in the fight. Congratulations to Tyson Fury. I was rooting for Wilder. He didn't get it done.
Facts. All right, so Jason, the WNBA Finals is here, baby. I was turned up, couldn't wait because this is one of the more star-studded games you can have. So in game one this weekend, the Chicago Sky took down the Phoenix Mercury 91-77. The Sky were pretty much in control the whole game. At a certain point, they were up by 20 points, and the Mercury had just came off of a tough 5-game semifinal series. Only had 2 days rest before they had to jump into the finals, which, again, this is the WNBA. Probably need to add more of a grace period in between rounds, but that's where we are right now. Candace Parker is returning home, and that is one of the biggest stories right now because she's a Chicago native, been playing with the Sparks her whole career. This is her first year going in her homecoming, and she took her team to the finals. And then you have the former Husky, which was named the GOAT by the WNBA for our W25 season, Diana Taurasi. She's been playing at an unreal level. So let me give you a little timeline for Diana. Clinched the finals. The next morning has a daughter. And then the next day after that starts the WNBA Finals. So she's crazy. Had herself a roller coaster of a few days. It could be the final games for both of them. That's conversation being talked about. Neither one of them have confirmed that, but that's just everyone speculating. So let's get into it. What are your thoughts?
So Diana, said after the game in which they got handled, which included a Sky like 17-0 run, Copper running wild, said that we're not tired, we're just getting our asses kicked right now. You have to say that, right? That's a thing you have to say. But also they look tired. They're getting run. Like rotations are a little slower, everything looks a little slower. The energy gap looks completely different. You mentioned the amount of things that Diana Taurasi has dealt with over the last 10 days. But they look tired. It was wanted a closer game, but it was an absolutely dominant performance from the Sky. Absolutely dominant.
It needs to be said too that with the Phoenix Mercury, they recently lost Kia Nurse to a ACL. She tore her ACL. They don't have Sophie Cunningham playing right now, but
she was
everyone
big off
knows,
the bench for them.
Yeah, but everyone knows when you get to the finals, it's almost that everyone's hurt. There's no excuses. That's kind of how it is. But to that point, I am very interested to see what happens on Wednesday because we talked about it. Phoenix went to a game 5. We know that Chicago clinched in 4 games. And right after their game, they flew out to the West Coast. So they flew to Vegas to wait to see who was going to win the Vegas and Phoenix matchup. So they already got the long travel out the way because in the WNBA, we fly commercial. But Commissioner Kathy Engelbert actually said that we're going to be flying private for the finals. So that's a beautiful step in the right direction because that travel is brutal. You know, like I talked about earlier, I was on a flight from Memphis back to Atlanta with the Hawks. And as you know, that's a private flight. And I was like, woo, child, the wealth. You know, it was nice to get back home the night of the game. It makes such a huge difference to where you don't have to wake up for the first flight out in the morning where you don't really get any rest. So I love seeing that the finals are going to have a chartered flight.
Flying commercial as a professional athlete, and a professional athlete for many of these ladies who are, 5'8", 5'9", 5'10", 6'1", 6'2". How do you stay fresh, and where do you sit? Like, how does that work? Do they block off a large portion of the cabin? Like, how does that work?
Yeah, that works that I could be 12A and Jason, you could be 12B. So that's kind of how it works in a sense of there's not blocked out. You know, with the new CBA, there were certain things like we have to get Delta Comfort Plus when available, exit rows when available. But before this past CBA, you said it nicely. Most of the players, I think the average height is 6'1", 6'2". So I was me listed at 5'7". I was one of the more comfortable ones, but they call me tiny. So that's I'm tiny for the WNBA. They call me itty bitty little bit. So I fit comfortably, but a lot of my teammates, it was a struggle. And not even to mention just the travel schedules. You're at the mercy of the airline. So you could get delayed for 4 hours. You could have weather conditions that cancel your flight. And now we are at the airport for extended amount of time waiting on our next flight to get booked. I've seen it all. And that's the tough part. So I was really happy to see that the WNBA made the commitment that traveling won't be a factor in the finals, which it shouldn't be. You should have everything you need and play at the best of your ability. So it's exciting. And this is like we talked about, this is one of the more star-studded games when you have a Phoenix Mercury team that has Skylar Diggins, Diana Taurasi, Brittany Griner. And then on the other side, you have Candace Parker, who is bringing out the whole city. It's exciting for the WNBA.
Coach Brandello said after the game, I don't want to make excuses, but we're fatigued. When you're tired, it's like your brain goes a bit dead and you're just trying to survive out there. Again, they just looked tired. It was unfortunate, but they just looked like they were gassed. I can't imagine flying commercial and then being like, okay, let's go. Now it's time to
we've
be in
gone
the playoffs.
Straight to the gyms before. I've taken 4-hour, 5-hour flights. We go straight to the gym from the airport, get a practice in, and then kind of just decompress afterwards. So it's tough. You know, it's that's the part where a lot of people, they don't realize that to see the level of performance you see from WNBA players, despite everything else that we have to kind of compartmentalize. You have to, you heard even Diana Taurasi, she's trying to tell us and tell herself at the same time, yeah, we're not tired. Yes, you are. I'm sure you're tired. You shouldn't say you're tired. I'll say it for you. I'm sure that things are tiring just in general. Everybody's tired after a long season. The NBA players, even after they take private flights, I'm sure they're tired. But when you have energy players like a Kalia Copper, who that is her thing, her energy is her, that was my thing. You know, like I didn't just wake up and get excited when I retired. A lot of people may not know because a lot of people didn't know me as a player. But as a player, energy is something that I can control. I couldn't control my height, my speed, how high I could jump. But one thing I always knew I could control was my attitude, knowing my plays, knowing my scout, and bringing the energy. So for me, that's when things like that, it's like, all right, I know I just got off of this flight, but let's head them up, move them out. So that's where it comes into play. But like I said, Chicago Sky, led by Allie Quigley, Courtney Vandersloot, who were the two players that returned from the 2014 finals appearance. And then you add on Kalia Copper, Candace Parker. That's a strong-looking team, boy.
What's the better ending to this story? Is it Candace returning home and winning a championship in her hometown? Or the GOAT, Diana Taurasi, winning her 4th WNBA Finals for the team she was drafted by, and she already has 3 championships for, assuming that they both retire after this season?
Wow. I mean, that is a tough question, because that's exactly why these playoffs and these finals are so interesting. Neither player has alluded to the fact that they are going to retire. That's us talk, like we did with Serena Williams, right. We do it.
Correct.
So I'm just saying that out loud. But with that scenario, oh my gosh. I mean, Diana Taurasi just got the GOAT vote, which means in the first 25 years of the WNBA's existence, she is the greatest player of all time in those 25 years. That award just got given to her on the game 1. But then you got Candace Parker, who there's a storyline there as well where, we know what happened with her when it came to the Olympics. She left LA to go home and play for her home city. We know what happened when LeBron did that and how the city turned up for him. I mean, Chance the Rapper was there at their home games. Jesse Jackson, Scottie Pippen. I mean, they had the who's who was at their games. And on the other side, Phoenix had the whole Phoenix Suns team. So
also, they're still producing. Like, it's not like, are they playing at the level that they were playing at like 8 years ago? No. But are they still producing? Candace Parker had 16, 8, 3 assists, 2 steals, and 2 blocks in this game.
Yeah, they're still both producing. And I think that's the thing, Diana Taurasi always says, why can't old people dream too? And so I get it, because I really do get it. I really don't know the answer to that. And I'm like trying to weigh it out, because it's like, if Diana Taurasi retires, that's got to be one of the biggest sports stories known to man. So that's the biggest story ever. Like the GOAT, just named the GOAT, is retiring. But I also think there's something to be said that a person navigates their own path. And we know that the Chicago Sky had a team that was ready and primed to get to where they are, and they had just one missing piece. We see that Candace was that piece. I think it has to be Diana Taurasi. I mean, it's just her career, what she's done, how things played off. I just told you the night after they clinched the finals, she had a whole baby and then goes on to the finals. If they win and she retires on a championship, having been named GOAT and all of that, I just don't see how there's any bigger story in sports.
One more question that I got to ask, that kind of an aside from this, sort of related. But like, so when as many WNBA athletes do, they will go play overseas in the off season. How much downtime would you actually have before you went to Maccabi or, or Australia or Russia? Like how much time would you actually have to get it together before you have to go over there and then play a whole nother season?
Listen, they write it in your contract in ink 2 weeks after. It varies, but I always had a minimum of 2 weeks after your last game. So that doesn't mean your last series. That means that if your game ended today, you are on the clock 14 days from now. You have to be in the country. For 10 years straight, I had about a week and a half in between each season. So we usually get off about 3 weeks per year. And that's why I actually made a mistake yesterday. So the game got delayed, as we know, like the Monday Night Football game got delayed due to storms and everything. And I tweeted out, like, are y'all going to finish and watch the rest of the game? Because it's a school night, basically. And everybody was like, who's going to tell her? No one's working tomorrow. And I'm like, oh my God, I forgot that, like, when you get to be like, when you're not an athlete, you have holidays. Like, I don't think people realize for 10 years I was overseas during Thanksgiving, Halloween. Like, we don't have holidays. Like, so I get so used to not function, like acknowledging holidays, that like when I'm like talking to people and they're like, oh, it's Indigenous People Day tomorrow, I'm like, oh wow, I'm still working, but it's great. And let people know we're recording right now on Indigenous People Day, just so the people that so I just forget sometimes that holidays are a thing. But to that point, athletes deal with a lot. Deal with not having holidays, and WNBA players deal with not having ideal travel and still produce. That's the thing that I want people to understand about the WNBA when you're watching it. The excellence of play is there, and then think about everything that they had to overcome to play at that level.
It is time for Buzzer Beaters, where we talk about the stories we didn't cover in our show this week because of time. My buzzer beater is John Collins, early Dunk of the Year candidate. For last week, obviously the NBA preseason is ongoing. Knicks look great, and John Collins of the Atlanta Hawks put one all over the Cleveland Cavaliers. I mean, all over them.
Yep.
The entire team, the entire squad, the city of Cleveland, everybody. Listen, I like Jared Allen. I think he's a really good player, really fun. He loves computers. I love that about him. But he got it put on his head, and it was exhilarating. Oh my God. That is the buzzer beater. What a fantastic play from John Collins, who was head and shoulders above Mr. Allen.
Head, shoulders, knees, and toes. I love it, Jason. Yes, I the question was asked to John, are you going to put it on a shirt? Because if people remember, John Collins, put Joel Embiid on a poster, then put Joel Embiid on a shirt of the poster and wore it to a press conference when Game 7 was over and they closed out the series. So we all know that John Collins is a say it with your chest type. So people wanted to know, was he going to put Jared Allen on a poster on his shirt? And he said it's up to the people. So y'all need to tweet John Collins. This is what the man said. He said he's going to give the people what they want, but he has to know that's what the people want. So if you want John Collins to start making shirts of every poster that he makes in the game of a player that he dunks on, just tweet him. You know what I'm saying? Just tweet John and let him know, because that's what he's waiting to hear. I love that was your buzzer beater, Jason. And mine this week, we're going to stay in the sports universe. And I got to give a huge shout out to Twitter Sports. So as we talked about already, the WNBA Finals started this Sunday. And on this Sunday, during the finals, Twitter Sports aired a commercial with all of WNBA Twitter in it, led by Ari Chambers and her crew. There was Jasmine Baker in there, Justine Brown. There was a lot of people in there, the faces we know. She knows sports. We know all of them that was in there. And I just have to give them a shout out, because there's not a lot of people investing in women. There's not a lot of new commercials about things involving women's sports. So to see a highly produced, and that's what I want to give a shout out to, the highly produced, because people will throw a cheap production together in a hurry for women's sports. I'm telling you, they'll try to figure it out. How can we make this happen with the least amount of money? I've seen plenty of those productions. But the commercial that was put on by Twitter Sports for hashtag WNBA Twitter, you could tell there was money behind it. There was a thought process behind it. Shouts to Adina Jones pulling the ones and twos behind it. You could just tell it felt like a real commercial. And I was happy to see it. So shouts to Twitter Sports. Shouts to WNBA Twitter. We on, baby. We in there. Let's go.
That's it for us. Follow and subscribe to us on Apple Podcasts or wherever you get your podcasts. And don't forget to subscribe to Takeline Show on YouTube for exclusive video clips from this episode, plus my digital series, All Caps NBA, which airs every Friday. Coming back soon. Check it out. Goodbye.
Let's go.